Okay, welcome. So my name is David, and today I will talk about navigation component in Android, Jetpack Navigation. This is more advanced talk. So first, I would like to ask who is Android developer? Raise your hand. Great, most of you. I will be showing a lot of Android code in Kotlin. And next question: who read at least one blog post about navigation component? Yeah, most of you. Great. So the talk is for you. This is more in-depth, how to use navigation component in like a complex app. So I'm Google Developer Expert for 3 categories: Android, Google Play, and Google Pay. I currently work for a bank called Velvon. I'll be talking about the architecture we have there at Velvon. And I also have my own company, which does an app Settle-up. Does anybody know Settle-up here? Woo. Great. Settle-up is group expense manager. So you enter who owes, who paid for what, and the app calculates who owes who on a trip and stuff like that. So first, I would like to talk about why to use Jetpack Navigation in the first place. It's a kind of a new thing, like 1 year old. It's a library from Google. And why to use it? So the main benefit is you have all the navigation at one place. There is one XML containing all the navigation into your whole app. So it's on one place, you can reason about it. There's also Android Studio support, so you can generate this graph of all the screens in your app, where does it go. It encourages using fragments, but without fragment transactions. And fragments are great, but fragment transactions are not. I'm sure some of you in your code, in your Crashlytics, have this crash. You cannot use fragment transaction after unsaved instant state. So if you use navigation component, you will no longer get this crash because the library does fragment transactions for you. And you can even specify animations between those fragments. So that's really nice. Another pain with fragments is that it's not easy to pass arguments to a fragment. And also, it's not like type safe, that normally you can pass some arguments, but if the fragment expects something else, it will crash on runtime. So navigation components have this SafeArgs plugin, which will generate code for all the fragment arguments. And this time you will have compile time check that all the fragments have the arguments they need. Another pain in Android, how to handle up navigation and back navigation correctly. So the difference is up navigation is this button on top left. It's part of your app. Back navigation is the hardware back button, or like the system back button. So a lot of apps handle this wrong. It's mostly the same, but there is a difference. If somebody is deep linked from different app into your app, then the behavior is different. For example, when you are in Gmail and you click link to Google Maps, so the Maps app open, and then if you click the top back button, so the up button, it should go up in the hierarchy of the app. So it should not go back. But the back button goes back, so it will go back to Gmail. But the up button should never leave your app. That's the difference. And a lot of apps have this wrongly, like they just use the same behavior. So if you use Jetpack Navigation, this is handled for you. It has support for deep links. So deep links are also kind of hard to do, like you have to do all these intent filters in your activities and a lot of boilerplate around them. Navigation simplifies this. And as I said, there is nice Android Studio support. You can see the graph, but I usually just look at the XML, edit the XML. And finally, Google is now more opinionated in which libraries we should use and which we shouldn't use. So this is a recommended way how to do navigation in Android apps today. The library is stable. There is version 2.1.0. So it's fine to use. And so the recommendation of Google is don't use fragment transactions, use navigation library, and it will handle fragment transaction for you. So now let's talk about our app a little bit. So it's a bank. It's a new bank which will be launched in Germany. We are not on Play Store yet, but we have quite a nice modern architecture. So it's 100% Kotlin. We start from the beginning in Kotlin, no legacy code. We have single activity, so most of the stuff is fragments. There are some exceptions. I will talk about them later. The app is multi-module, so we have a lot of modules. Such as it's recommended today, it speeds up build time quite a lot. And as architecture for the screens, we use MVVM, Android view models, standard thing today. For dependency injection, we don't use Dagger from Ashtalks. We use Coin, much simpler DI than Dagger, in my opinion. And we use a lot of RX Java, but not on the view models and view part, just on the repositories, processing the data from backends. And we have Firestore as well. That's quite unique for a bank to use such cloud technologies. So RX Java is great with Firestore because then all the UI is reactive, and you just you can update parts of the app based on updates from Firestore. It really works well there. So first questions what we were dealing with is where in the multi-module app, where to put this XML which defines the navigation. So this is our simplified module structure. You cannot see. So, so we have an app. It's the app module. If you don't have multi-modules, you will have just one module called app. And we try to have the app as minimum as possible. So it has just the application class and some basic initialization, and manifest, stuff like that. But we try to keep it small as possible. And then the app depends on features. So we put most of our stuff into features. We separate it into high-level features. Like in a bank, we have cards, accounts, payments, stuff like that. So these are the features. And all the features are dependent on the common Android library, which has everything in common, some common views which are shared between multiple features or some stuff like that. And then we have common JVM library, which doesn't depend on Android. It's Kotlin only module. It's really nice to separate Android from stuff which doesn't need to be tied with Android. You can much easily test it with normal JUnit stuff. So most of the core business logic is here, which downloading stuff from backend, parsing it, preparing it into some nicer format. That's there. So now where to put this navigation XML? So if you look in documentation of navigation, they will tell you put it into the app, because they don't really think about multi-module. And actually, the Android Studio integration works best when it's in the app. But I think this works nicely, because app depends on features, but features don't depend on app. So features cannot see stuff from the navigation graph. So there are some workarounds. You can reuse IDs, stuff like that. But I don't think this is good. You will, for example, lose the safe arcs. You will lose the safe arcs. You can only navigate somewhere, but without arguments. So there is another recommendation. Is you can, in the navigation graph, you can have subgraphs. So you can split the big graph into smaller graphs. So for each feature, you can create a subgraph and put the subgraph into each feature. So this works well. You will have safe arguments, but only within a feature. So you can navigate within a feature, but if you want to navigate from one feature to another feature, you have the same problem. Like you don't have access to navigation graphs of other features. So again, there are some workarounds, but I think what we actually use is better. So we put the XML here into the common Android library. And then all the features have access to it. You can navigate from anywhere to anywhere. It's really nice. The safe arcs works. The only thing which doesn't work is if you view it in Android Studio, common Android doesn't see fragments from the features. So in the XML, the classes of fragments are red because it doesn't see them. But it compiles with no problems. It's just red in Android Studio, but who cares? Yeah. So this is how we solve it. And next problem we were tackling is we use this view model architecture, and you actually want to navigate from view models. You don't want to navigate from fragments. You want to, in our architecture, fragments are really simple. They just handle view, and they shouldn't contain any logic. All the logic is in view models, and like where to navigate somewhere sometimes could be complex. Like you can decide. So we want this logic in view models, but this API is built around fragments a lot. So there is a way, standard way, you can communicate from view model to fragment using live data. So that's what we are using. We created these classes. We call them navigation command, and there are a couple of options how you can navigate. You can navigate to some destination. You can navigate back. You can navigate to root. That means like to the root destination. So we created these classes, these commands. And then we just send these classes into live data, and fragment is listening to these classes and will do the actual navigation. We renamed this as a command because I think it's a nicer word. But actually, this is a concept called single live event. So there is a link where you can find the code. It's part of architecture blueprints made by Google. And it's special live data which emits a value only once. Like normal live data, we cannot use because live data saves the value, and if you rotate the screen or do configuration change, you will get the same value again. But we don't want this for single events like navigation or showing snack bar, for example. That means like if you dismiss the snack bar, rotate the screen, you will get the snack bar again. You don't want this, so you want this just one time. So for this, we use this single live event. We just renamed it into command, but it's the same thing. And we try to put all of this shared logic, all of this boilerplate code into base classes. So BaseViewModel, BaseFragment. So all this logic is there, and then it's really simple to use it in actual view models, actual fragments. So this is how it looks in the base view model. It just posts a value to this live data. And this is how it looks in BaseFragment. So BaseFragment in onActivity created is listening to these commands, and when it receives command from the view model, it will call the actual API of the navigation library, which is this find nav controller navigate. And this is how it looks in like concrete view model. So you see it's really simple. I will just call navigate. And this class is auto-generated from the SafeArcs plugin. So it will also enforce that this fragment needs this card ID. It's part of the navigation graph. So this fragment will always get card ID. It's like a detail of the card, so it needs card ID, and it will always get it. So it's then simple like this. Another thing is how to use arguments in view models. So again, this API is built around fragments, and we want to use these arguments in a view model. For example, you get this card ID, but the card ID is needed for loading some data from the backend, and we need this card ID in the view model, not in the fragment. So again, we go to base class, and we automate this. So we pass the fragment arguments to the view model, so view model can access them. So we can do this only once. So if safe instance state is null, then we set arguments to view model, and we call method load data, and there the view model will start loading data. So this is the implementation of load data method in one concrete fragment. It will get the argument from this bundle. This is again auto-generated by the navigation component, and it will call this load method, which actually loads the data from our backend using this card ID. So another special thing in a bank is that we have, or even in more apps, we have a requirement that there is always a login screen. Like each launch of the app, if you go from background to foreground, there needs to be a login screen. We keep session of user just for 5 minutes, then we log him out for security reasons. And this is a little tricky with navigation component. So how to do it? So there is a section in documentation about what I call it conditional navigation. And the recommendation there is to do it like this. Like if you go to, let's say, profile fragment, there you detect that the user is not logged in. You fire login fragment, user is logged in, and then you show again profile fragment. So this works, but it has some disadvantages. Mainly the login fragment, in that case, when the user is on login fragment, it's not a root destination because the fragment, profile fragment is a root destination. It has some side effects. For example, if the user presses back in the login fragment, it will go back to profile fragment, then the profile fragment will, I'm not signed in, go back to the login fragment. And like this back and forth will be visible for the user. There are some ways how to work around it, but like we didn't want to work around, we wanted proper solution. Also, another side effect is, in this case, the profile fragment in the very beginning, when the user is logged out, it will start initializing. There will be maybe some network call if we have like on the beginning, and it will do network call that our backend will figure out, this user is not signed in, send like 401. So like we don't want these useless requests. We know the user is not signed in. So we try to work around this and like work it out, and then we figure out the solution is really simple, and it's in Android since first version, activities. So in this case, we actually decided that we don't need to have everything is one single activity. There are valid use cases for more activities. So for this special case, login activity, it's different activity because it's completely different life cycle than the rest of the app. So we have most of the app when the user is signing in the main activity, and login only, and also like activation, onboarding, which is like part of the app when the user is not our client yet. So that's separate activities, and it's quite nicely separated. So it's that simple, like a standard Android. On start, we figure out that the user is logged out. We run new activity. We finish this activity. And it's so fast that the fragments will not start even initializing. So that's really nice. But there is one issue about deep links. So we have deep links, for example, from notifications. So user get notification about the card, for example. And then we want this flow, that the user clicks notification, he sees login, he logs in, and then he goes to card detail. But this is not possible normally, because if you switch these activities, you will lose these deep links. So we found a way to do it. So navigation component, if you use this deep links, it will actually generate some intent extras for the first activity. And we can take these extras, which is just a bundle, and we can pass it as like extra for the other activity. We call it deep link extras. So the other activity will not do anything about it. It will just keep the state, deep link extras. And then when the user is signed in, we go back. So we just take this deep link extras from the arguments, and we pass it back to the first activity. So we just like put the data to login and then back to main activity, and navigation works well. Like it will navigate to like card detail where the user wants to be. So one last thing is that how to navigate back with result. Like I'm sure you know API called start activity for result for activities. That's quite nice API, but there is nothing like that for fragments, and nothing like that part of the navigation library. There is actually an open issue. People are saying like we want this, but it's not implemented yet. But there is good news in Android Dev Summit, which was last month. So there is talk about fragments, and they actually, because fragments are now part of support library or Android X and not part of the system, so they can add more features more easily, and they are working on a solution to create like something like start activity for result, but for fragments. So that would be great, and then you can also use it in navigation. So, but right now, if you look at documentation, they recommend to use shared view models. So you can also share view models across multiple fragments, for example. Sometimes it's useful, but I don't think like this use case is good fit for it. Just to create shared view model, just for just maybe to pass one number, like you want to go back and pass one number, or even Boolean if it's successful or not. Like it's too much boilerplate, and shared view models should be for more complex things. Like you have 5 fragments and you want to share some data between these 5 fragments, you have some flow. So it's great for that, but this is more like a workaround. So we developed our own solution. We have this interface, navigation result, and the first fragment should implement this interface. And then automatically, when you call navigate with result, this method will be called, and in the first fragment you will get this callback, and you can handle the result somewhere. So the implementation is just this. You don't have to read through the code. There is a link. You see it? So there is a link with the code. It's quite simple, actually. We just look at the backstack of fragments, and we just pass. We just call this method on navigation result for the fragment on a backstack, and then we pop backstack. That means we go back. So hopefully in the future this won't be needed. It will be part of the library. Until then, you can use our solution. So this is last thing. So you can have some cases with some really complex navigation, which cannot be easily handled by navigation library. So how to deal with that? Let me introduce our case in our app. So we have the very first screen. We call it dashboard, and it's quite complex screen. Like a lot of stuff is on the dashboard. So there are basically 3 states of the dashboard. The user can have multiple accounts. Then we list the accounts, and if you click the one account, it will go into product detail. But there is also a special case when the user have only one account, and that means we show only one account. We call it single account dashboard, and the navigation can be either from like the list of accounts or from the detail, and like there was a lot of boilerplate. This was like quite hard to do. Like we were looking like we are hacking this navigation library. So at the end, and we also have custom navigation, custom animations between those fragments. We have this account switcher, which is like this special thing. So this was quite hard to do. And at the end, we figure out a simple solution, again, using normal Android APIs. We actually take this part of the app from the navigation graph, and we have just one fragment. We call it dashboard fragment, which is part of the navigation graph. And this product list, product detail, are like normal child fragments, and we are using normal fragment transactions for it because we have such custom animation that we really need to be in tight control. So in the beginning, I said don't use fragment transaction. Now I say unless you have really complex UI, but like you can still use it. Like for most of the cases, it's fine. This is special case, so we handle fragment transactions ourselves. I hope we'll not get that many crashes. So let's summarize. So if you have multiple modules, use this navigation XML into something like common Android, some common library dependent on Android, which is visible from all the features. Then navigate from view models, not from fragments. Use this single live event concept and put all boilerplate into base classes. So your actual view models, actual fragments are really simple. Try to automatically pass arguments from fragments to view model because that's where you need them. If you have a use case like a login, put it into a different activity, and you can pass these extras back and forth for deep link support. If you need navigation with result, you can use our solution until it's implemented properly in the library. And you can opt out from the navigation library anytime. If your code gets too complex and you are thinking you are hacking the library, maybe it's not needed. You can use normal fragment transactions like you always do. And that's it. Thank you. I have a blog post on Medium with most of the code here. Thank you.
David Vávra. Thank you very much. Let's see. Yeah, we have some questions. So, are you allowed to talk about bank implementation details publicly?
Yes, I'm actually encouraged to. So we are trying to share, like I was not allowed to share a screenshot with you, but like internals of the app, yes. If you're interested more, I was in CZ podcast, and I was talking about Firestore in a bank, in like highly regulated environment. So we have a Dagi in our team, so he shares a lot as well.
So I guess you can't show part of navigation XML? The second one?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, I was just forbidden to show screenshots, but code nobody understands, right?
So, do you really want to see it, or is it just a rhetorical question?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have it on my computer, on this computer. I can show you later if you come to me.
Okay. So join David during the rest of the day, please. Next, where did you get that hardware back button isn't the same as top one?
Android
okay.
documentation.
Okay. Okay, why don't you pass fragment args to view model by constructor? It's quite easy with coin. It is?
Well, coin is instantiating the view models, and we don't have the arguments at the time. Like we are not in control. So like lifecycle events, we need to wait for a lifecycle event. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So thank you very much, David. This was David Vávra. Thank you very much.
Thank you.